Don't let it go to your head, no. Don't let it go to your head, no. Peace and love to my family. Don't let it go to your head, no. It's gonna be a good presentation, don't worry. Don't let it go to your head, no. Peace and love to the family. Welcome to the Darus Corbin Mystery School, the home of the esoteric and metaphysical knowledge. YouTube, of course. Family, of course, I do not own the copyrights of that wonderful song. Don't let it go to your head. Shout out to Grand Pooba. Shout out to Lord Jamar. Shout out to the brother Sadiq X. Shout out to Grand Nubian. Don't let it go to your head. Thank you first and foremost for those who took the time to watch the murder of Hapatia, a divine mother, a divine feminine in our ancient history, who had the gnosis, who represented an incarnated version of Sophia the Wisdom. If you watch, you've seen how the early Christians, the barbarian ones that came with their one worship God faith, murdered her. Not just murdered her, broke her jaw, tore her from limb to limb, torso. And even then, after their triumph, they went and just digged in her flesh till she was pretty much nothing left. Then celebrated that triumph by giving you the Holy Trinity, my Christians and my religious folks, giving you, formulating, as they say, the Holy Trinity, giving you that doctrine. When the same ones that gave you that were the same ones that had a hand in killing this divine feminine energy, erasing all that was connected to her and the ancestors, and bringing this worship, this distorted mutation of a religion into the minds of the people. So tonight, what we're going to be doing this afternoon, right now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be diving deep into the human psyche, to the human mind, and see how deep has this religious mindfuck has got us programmed, possessed, problematic. So thank you as always, family, for rocking with me on the Darus Corbin Mystery School. We're going right back where we left off in this book, Not in His Image. Make sure you get this book, Not in His Image. Gnostic Vision, Sacred Ecology, and the Future of Belief. Now, I'm not going to tarry on too long, but we're going to get right to it. I want to find the definition of this word that some of us, most of us, should know very, very well. That word is scapegoat. That's right, I said it, scapegoat. S-C-A-P-E-G-O-A-T. And of course, you already know the pen and the pad is ready. Let's go. Scapegoat. Let's go over the definitions for scapegoat. And yes, this is part of this wonderful lecture this afternoon. So get ready for a good one. Scapegoat. A person who is blamed for the wrongdoings, mistakes, or faults of others, especially for reasons of expensity. Here's number 2 definition. In the Bible, a goat sent into the wilderness after the Jewish chief priest has symbolically laid the sins of the people upon it. Once again, in the Bible, a goat sent into the wilderness after the Jewish chief priest has symbolically laid the sins of the people upon it. The divine scapegoat. The divine scapegoat. Are you ready, people? I promise you it's going to be a wonderful presentation. We are going to go a little bit deeper into the human psyche and the effect that religion has caused to our mind. Thank you for rocking with me as always. Let's go. 5 minutes in. Let's go. In considering why some Europeans committed genocide and mindless destruction of nature in the New World, a historical pattern by no means over, but continuing furiously on a global scale with corporate agendas implemented by IT, and both of those are capital, I and T. Now, at the forefront of the assault, I initially proposed that the victim perpetrator, and family, that's victim hyphen perpetrator. Remember I tell you we're about to be in the human psyche, and we're about to go deep into the human psyche this afternoon? I need you to get ready. This is serious. You're going to leave by the time nighttime. I know a lot of us are going to watch this at nighttime. You're going to really go deep into who you are and what religion mentally have done to you. So bear with me. I thank you for watching. Are you ready? Let's go. Let's read that again. In considering why some Europeans committed genocide and mindless destruction of nature in the New World, a historical pattern by no means over, but continuing furiously on a global scale with corporate agendas implemented by IT. Now at the forefront of the assault, I initially proposed that the victim-perpetrator bond works in the course of history as it is known to work in dysfunctional families. The Redeemer complex, the insidious core of salvationist belief, asserts the redemptive value of suffering in such a way that it legitimates and even sanctifies suffering. Let's read that again. I initially proposed that the victim-perpetrator bond works in the course of history, as it is known to work in dysfunctional families. The Redeemer complex, the insidious core of salvationist belief, asserts the redemptive value of suffering in such a way that it legitimates and even sanctifies suffering. On top of all of that, the victim-perpetrator bond makes suffering extremely contagious. On top of that, I said family, the victim-perpetrator bond makes suffering extremely contagious. The invaders of the New World were descendants of indigenous people, whose way of life was destroyed by carriers of the Palestinian Redeemer complex. As if by a biological plague, infected by the same virus, they in turn destroyed the way of life of the indigenous people of the Americas. Like the Christians who converted their distant ancestors to the Redeemer complex. Some of the invaders believed in a God who could redeem sin, and this belief permitted them to commit sin, to inflict suffering in his cause, and even to feel sanctimonious about it. And sanctimonious is spelled Sanctimonious. To inflict suffering in his cause and even feel sanctimonious about it. Y'all all right, my beautiful people? I'm going to keep going. Spanish mercenaries burned the natives of Central America by 13s. I'll read that again. Spanish mercenaries burned the natives of Central America by 13s, and I quote, in honor of our Redeemer and the 12 apostles, end quote. This was by Bartholomew de la Casse. The sanctified victim. That's what it said down bottom if you couldn't see it. But you know, I told you to get this book. You're going to need it. This is my second favorite book, first only to the Nag Hammadi scriptures. The sanctified victim. Uh-oh, Corbin. You know what you... Yes, I know. I know what I'm about to do. To my Christian family out there, the ones now that have prepared people like me when I was younger for the rapture. warned me by all the prophecies and all the chips and all the so-and-sos and so-and-sos to become at the end days. The reason I am the divine Christ is because my path has already been played out since I was a kid. Been played out and laid out. I noticed that by the time 2020 and the rapture started coming, so to speak, it was the same Christians that raised me up in the churches that were running scared, afraid of this thing called death, this portal, this birthright. So afraid to evolve out of the physical. That's what it is. But yet you are saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Spirit. Let's go. This is the sanctified victim. Saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Spirit. The lethal insanity of the victim-perpetrator bond is staggering. The complicity of victims and perpetrators is a gruesome pack, but there is still a deeper dimension to this horror. But there is still a deeper dimension to this horror. We're peeling back the layers of the onions in real time, my elite, enlightened ones. You are, I am that I am. Discussing the question of what, and I quote, makes God accessory to the manifest sinfulness of the human world, end quote. Alan Watts. I have heard a lot of and read a lot of Alan Watts' work. Do some research on Alan Watts. Alan Watts observed, and I quote, family, beyond this theological nightmare, there is a let's slow this one down. Beyond this theological nightmare, there is the fascination of supernal masochism. And this is class, by the way, so we're going to look this up. Masochism. This is class, by the way. This is why I tell you to have pen and pad ready. Masochism. M-A-S-O-C-H-I-S-M. If you never heard this word, if your preachers, your bishops, your reverends never talked this word to about you in Sunday school, Bible school, it's time that you know this now. M-A-S-O-C-H-I-S-M. What is it?
Masochism.
Thank you. The tendency to derive pleasure, especially sexual gratification, from one's own pain or humiliation. And I quote, with things such as bondage and masochism, it's all right if you both go for it. And here's another definition. In general use, the enjoyment of what appears to be painful or tiresome. Once again, that word is?
Masochism.
Thank you so much. So let's read that again. And I quote, beyond this theological nightmare, there is this fascination of supernal masochism, end quote. The factor of supernal masochism comes to expression in what can be called victim-perpetrator collision. Victim-perpetrator collision. Now, we're still in the human psyche right now. Victim-perpetrator collision. And now we know what the word masochism means. So let me read that one more time. Beyond this theological nightmare, there is a fascination of supernal masochism, end quote. The factor of supernal masochism, end quote, comes to expression in what can be called victim-perpetrator collision. Listen, the two parties are not merely complicit in their beliefs. They are intricately and intimately codependent in their actions. Victims and perpetrators need each other desperately and use each other both viciously and vicariously to keep their bond intact. This is not true of first-time out-of-the-blue victims, of course, but of the addicted kind, those who come back for more, glorify in the victim role, and blindly follow the same narrative as the perpetrators, convinced that it puts them on a higher moral ground than those puts them on a higher moral ground than those who harm them, or believing they are called to suffer for the sake of others. Or believing they are called to suffer for the sake of others. Or believing they are called to suffer for the sake of others. But now, a huge objection. If the Redeemer complex is so utterly wrong, so contrary to the essential good nature of humanity, how can it be so powerful? If it is really so demented, how can the salvation narrative capture and convince so many people, you might ask? If the answer to this question is lacking so far, it is because the breakdown of the four components of the Redeemer complex and their permutations through history has not yet exposed the nucleus of the complex, the numinous source of its overwhelming power, the divine victim. And yes, I'm going to read that again. But now a huge objection. If the Redeemer complex is so utterly wrong, so contrary to the essential good nature of humanity, how can it be so powerful? If it is really so demented, how can the salvation narrative capture and convince so many people? If the answer to this question is lacking so far, it is because the breakdown of the four components of the Redeemer complex and their permutations through history has not yet exposed the nucleus of the complex, the numerous source of its overwhelming power, i.e., the divine victim. The divine victim. And my beautiful people, I'm just looking at the time. We only 17 minutes in, so you already know this is about to go down. Tell a friend to tell a friend to rock with the Darus Corbin Mystery School. There's nothing wrong with you seeing and knowing that the divine Christ is here. That you are Christ. Christ is within you. Activate that. How do you do that? The I am. Knowing that you are what? You're amazing. You're abundant. You are rich. You are. I am greatness. I am love. I am strength. I am power. Once you start saying I am and knowing your I am, then you can know who the true Christ is. And for my Orthodox Christians, that's the secret, I guess you can say, the esoteric of what the Jesus character was telling you in your Bible. That you have to go inside of you to activate the Christ. And once you activate that, it's just like a rotating wheel. Everything just works. The gears just line, the chakras, which are the spinning wheels, just lined up. They were lined in order. The upper, the lower, till you reach that crown chakra. But let's go in. In his two main works, Things Hidden from the Foundation of the World and Violence and the Sacred, these are books that these are more books that I'm giving you to write down. Here we go. In his two main works, Things Hidden from the Foundation of the World and Violence and the Sacred, cultural anthropologist Rene Girard, and that's Girard, probed deeply into the Redeemer complex. At many points, his analysis comes close to the Gnostic understanding of redemption theology and the threat it poses to human society. Girard identifies what he calls, rightly so I reckon, the generative mechanism of all religion, and I quote, the generative mechanism of all religion. This is, and I quote, the victimage mechanism, end quote, or, quote again, the surrogate victim syndrome, end quote. In plain English, Rene Girard is a Catholic revisionist, postmodern, deconstructionist, and cultural anthropologist with a lisp, and he's French, this book states. This mechanism is scapegoating. Listen, we never left the Bible. This mechanism is scapegoating. It manifests in social enmeshment. As violence enacted through a ritual of victimization that simultaneously expiates and perpetrates the cause of violence. The original scapegoat was the sacred king, a figure we encountered in tracing Jewish theocracy. In the time before male-only theocracy emerged around 4000 BCE, people living in the pre-urban societies had to come to terms with wrongdoing in their midst. They realized that perpetration will happen more often than not, with no way to discover who the perpetrator is. Now let me read that again. They realized that perpetration will happen more often than not, with no way to discover who the perpetrator is. If the perpetrator cannot be found and punished, victims must accept living without compensation and closure. Most of the time, this is the way it goes in the world. There can be no absolute guarantee of justice in human society. Our ancestors were sensitive folk who found this situation cruel, even intolerable. But they were not so delusional as to contact a way to avoid it, or disguise it, or pretend it was not so. In fact, they came up with a rather good solution to the problem of perpetration. They decided to blame the male chief of the community for any and all wrongdoing in cases when the actual perpetrator could not be found. Now, if any of y'all like me, when you hear this, you're going to start maybe going into this past life experience. So as I read that, and as I read this, I am very well aware that we are now activating certain past lives. So let me go in. They decided to blame the male chief of the community for any and all wrongdoing in cases when the actual perpetrator could not be found. Let's recall that in pre-patriarchal societies, before this male hypermasculinity world, before the Europeans took all the divine energy and truth and wisdom away from us people and us divine people, let me continue reading. They decided to blame the male chief of the community for any and all wrongdoing in cases when the actual perpetrator could not be found. Let's recall that in pre-patriarchal societies, the tribal chief or king was empowered by, the tribal chief or king was empowered by a priestess who represented the goddess. Let's recall that in pre-patriarchal societies, family, thank you for rocking with me, the tribal chief or king was empowered by a priestess who represented the goddess. The rite of Hieros Gamos, and that's Hierosgamos, sacred mating. So Hieros Gamos, or sacred mating, guaranteeing that the king-to-be was courageous but tender, a noble and innocent man who could surrender to a woman in the most intimate act of human contact. Whoa. Y'all ready for that, Christian folk? That sounds so beautiful. I'm going to read it again. Let's recall that in the pre-patriarchal societies, the tribal chief or king was empowered by a priestess who represented the goddess. The rite of Hieros Gamos, and that's Hierosgamos, which is sacred mating, guaranteeing that the king-to-be was courageous but tender, a noble and innocent man who could surrender to a woman in the most intimate act of human contact. By accepting blame, even though innocent, the tribal king became the, and I quote, surrogate victim, end quote, who would bear the sins of the community. To ancient sensibilities, it seemed wrong to place a woman, the life giver of the species, in the dicey role of scapegoat. So the surrogate victim was always a man. Being a sacred king had its perks, but it carried the risk of being killed to expiate, that's EXPIATE, the unsolved crimes of the community. In ancient Greece, the sacrificial king was called the pharmakon, and that's PHARMAKON. Girard explains that pharmakon means both malady and remedy. And I quote, the victim selected for scapegoating draws to itself all the violence infecting the original victim, and through its own death transforms the baneful violence into beneficial violence. This system works because it encouraged the king to model honesty and kindness and assist or guide members of the community to do the same. Far more important than the role modeling function, however, was the fact that scapegoating, the king purged the community of the need for retaliatorial violence. One of the most vicious forms of behavior in human experience, retaliatorial violence, is particularly gruesome when the perpetrator of the inciting act cannot be identified. Pagan society inherited the custom of pre-patriarchal communities. Pagan society inherited the custom of pre-patriarchal communities to allow retaliation in cases where the wrongdoer was known and could be punished or killed by the kin of their victims. And I quote, an eye for an eye, end quote. That was considered fair enough. But when retaliatorial violence had no certain target, and when it is sanctified by religious beliefs, and when it is sanctified, saved, and filled with the Holy Ghost by religious beliefs and driven by an inflamed sense of righteousness, it wreaks hell on earth. It becomes a, what's that word? Ecocidal and genocidal tool. It becomes an ecocidal, and genocidal tool. And beyond that, an apocalyptic weapon. And I'll slow down to make sure I get the words right. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm gonna read that again. I think that was worthy to be read again. I think that was definitely worthy to be read again. They said that was considered an eye for an eye. That was considered fair enough. But when retaliatorial violence has no certain target, and when it is sanctified by religious beliefs and driven by an inflamed sense of righteousness, it wreaks hell on earth. It becomes a ecocidal and genocidal tool, and beyond that, an apocalyptic weapon. Sacrificial kingship was the original uncorrupted form of Girard's, and I quote, victimage mechanism, end quote. In the small-scale communities where it arose, it worked rather well. Let me read that again. Sacrificial kingship was the original uncorrupted form of Girard's, and I quote, victimage mechanism, end quote. In the small-scale communities where it arose, it worked rather well. But over time, and with the increasing complexity of society in urban settings, victimage de-evolved into a complex pathological mechanism, and the drive for retaliatorial violence, ever present in human nature, morphed into the Redeemer complex. In a bizarre twist, the divine victim merged into the numinous prototype of the Redeemer. In a bizarre twist, my beautiful people, the divine victim merged into the numinous prototype of the Redeemer. Now, this says living order. Man, we only 29 minutes in. From this moment, we never left the Bible. We told you we are dealing with the human psyche now. We are unpeeling the layers of that onion. So many layers. But you really got to understand, remember the words so far, victim, perpetrator, as well as known in dysfunctional families. Divine victim. Over time, scapegoating de-evolved into a grand religious scheme for making everything right in the world, or defeating what was not right, rather than a modest and provisional custom for keeping the peace. Gerards says that scapegoating in its latter, or scapegoating in its later degenerate form is, and I quote, not simply an illusion and a mystification, but the most formidable and influential illusion and mystification in human experience. Scapegoating is the root of religious delusion. Quote, end quote. Did you hear what I said? Scapegoating is the root of, and I quote, religious delusion, end quote, but also what gives religion such vast social and political power. It only works, however, as long as the people in the religious system do not see how it works. Woo! It's still Snapple facts, don't get it twisted. See, stuff like that kind of make it, if you're not ready for this Gnostic and esoteric teaching, it's going to make your skin crawl, people. We are now dealing with the human psyche. It's time for the spirit to talk. Time for the physical to sit back and let the spirit drive the wheel. Let's read that again. Scapegoating is the root of religious delusion, but also what gives religion such vast social and political power. See, it only works, however, as long as the people in the religious system do not see how it works. And I quote, religion protects man only as long as its ultimate foundations are not revealed. Let me read that again. And I quote, religion protects man only as long as its ultimate foundations are not revealed. Let's keep going. Girard shows that those who benefit from scapegoating are, or appear to be, protected from the violence within themselves, while in fact they allow others to live it out for them. Let's read that again. Girard shows that those who benefit from scapegoating are, or appear to be, protected from the violence within themselves, while in fact they allow others to live it out for them. It permits them to disown any association with it. Victimage provides a sense of absolution, but covertly it allows both victims and perpetrators to participate deeply in the pathological transaction of violence. Girard's astonishing analysis reveals the victim-perpetrator bond in its collusive aspect. Victims deny they could ever do violence to others. Perpetrators deny the violence they do to others. At its root, this is one and the same denial. Let me read that again. Victims deny they could ever do violence to others. Perpetrators deny the violence they do to others. As its root, this is one and the same denial. Scapegoating, he asserts, is the hidden core of, and I quote, all the forms of lying order inside which humanity lives. I told you guys we were going to the human psyche. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. I told you the divine Christ is here. This is the age of Aquarius I've been telling you about, and so many other great people have been telling you about and preparing you for. You must know you are greater to escape this illusion. The most extreme and grandiose pathological mutation of scapegoating is the Redeemer complex, centered on the figure of the divine victim. Perpetrators can use Christianity family. I told y'all this is about to get real. I can just feel everybody at the edge of the seat. You ready? The most extreme and grandiose pathological mutation of scapegoating is the Redeemer complex, centered on the figure of the divine victim. Perpetrators can use Christianity to legitimate their actions because both they and their victims believe in the same solution to the problem of evil. Split source duality implies that pain and suffering come from the one good God, but so does relief from those evil, and justice and vindication as well. It is a win-win situation. Salvationist faith is an open license to murder, torture, rape, lie, manipulate, and control, because whatever the perpetrator do, they are assured of the passive collusion of the victims, but only the believing victims who embrace the same creed and follow the same plan, the plot of salvation history. Salvation is faith offered those who suffer at the hands of others the right to claim the high moral ground. Many of the sayings of Jesus in the New Testament assert and indemnify, indemnify, that arrangement. Many of the sayings of Jesus in the New Testament assert and indemnify that arrangement. Victims who accept the redemptive value of suffering and embrace the belief in a supernatural agent of retribution, can be tortured and killed. Let's read that again. Victims who accept the redemptive value of suffering and embrace the belief in a supernatural agent of retribution can be tortured and killed to the end of time, knowing they will come out on top, vindictive by the Father God, and miraculously revivified to join the company of the saved. I'm only 35 minutes in. Hit the like button. Leave a comment. We are family. We are family. And for y'all who are squeezing your butts, mad, filled with anger, for what? You can release that. This is liberation. Use your imagination to get what you want. What did we say the night before, last night? What did we say? Imagination. Break the word imagination. It's right in front of you. Now break it down. Imagination. You are the magician of your world. Where were we? Victims who accept the redemptive value of suffering and embrace the belief in a supernatural agent of retribution can be tortured and killed to the end of time, knowing they will come out on top, vindicated by the Father God, and miraculously revivified to join the company of the saved. So this goddamn belief got you so fucked up. Got the world still so fucked up that it got you praising the same God that will save the same person who would take your life. But you're not worried because that same God you pray to is going to sit back and not only save you from this horror, but save the person that killed you as well. That's, you know what? That's how you feel. That's yours. At the end of the day, this is the Esoteric Channel. For those who truly understand what the fuck I'm saying. A lot of people are not alive. A lot of people are walking around dead and they want to remain dead. For those folks, you know there's other channels that can entertain you. But for my esoteric people, you know where I'm going with this. Giving all that power away. At the same time, those who fanatically enact the dominator agenda can be assured that they are forcing the world to conform to God's plan. At the same time, those few, listen what it said, those few who do have that power, because the masses are slaved. Social media, war, famine, vaccines. This is what people are worried about now. This is what people are minding, not on liberating themselves spiritually, but fear. At the same time, those few who fanatically enact the dominator agenda can be assured that they are forcing the world to conform to God's plan. Victims and perpetrators collude in a game of, and I quote, supernal sadomasochism, to play on Alan Watts' tart observation. Along with the lie about who created the world comes the lie about how victims and perpetrators will triumph over the world in the endgame scenario of victimage. The divine victim presents another instance of counter mimicry. This figure imitates the tribal scapegoat, the instrument of justice suited to the indigenous psyche. Let's read that again. The divine victim presents another instance of counter mimicry. The figure imitates the tribal scapegoat, the instrument of justice suited to the individual's psyche, but invest it with a supernatural value that overwhelms and counsels the human sense for the right outcome. And I want to read that one more time so we can make that make sense. The divine victim presents another instance of counter mimicry. This figure imitates the tribal scapegoat. Listen, the instrument of justice suited to the individuous psyche, but invested with supernatural value that overwhelms and counsels the human sense for the right outcome. This religious bullshit took the fucking whole indigenous psyche, using the imagination to really acquire what we want, being in tune with Mother Nature. They must have been terrified to see how belief in superhuman redemption glorifies and mystifies suffering and sanction it adherts to inflict suffering or be accessory to it without admitting that they are even or especially to themselves. This shit is getting real. Are y'all with me? I know y'all with me. I can feel the energy. And they're talking about the indigenous people here. They must have been terrified to see how belief in superhuman redemption glorifies and mystifies sufferings and sanctions its adherts to inflict suffering or be accessory to it without admitting that they are even or especially to themselves. And they must have been taken unaware when they found themselves targeted by pathological violence that breeds like a lethal virus in victim-perpetrator collision. Victim-perpetrator collision is vividly dramatized in both the Old and New Testaments. But, and I quote, Passion of Christ, but the, and I quote, Passion of Christ, end quote, is the ultimate enactment of the Redeemer complex on the stage of history. At the center of this drama is the innocent lamb, re-scapegoat it says, who bears the sins of the world. The belief system attached to the divine victim offers a solution to the evil. Gerard skillfully shows how this solution is delusional, yet it works, But I would emphasize that the solution works only for people who are themselves delusional. In an insane world, insanity makes sense. Now shit just got real because let me roll these goddamn windows down. I know I can feel the energy. I know y'all can too. It's getting real. I told you in the last presentation we're going to go into the human psyche. Aren't we pulling back them layers? Tell a friend about this presentation. This is class. Class is in session. Welcome to the mystery school. Welcome to the mystery school. Yeah. Let's read that again. Woo. Wonderful breeze. Victim-perpetrator collision is vividly dramatized in both the Old and New Testaments. But the Passion of Christ is the ultimate enactment of the Redeemer complex on the stage of history. At the center of this drama is the innocent lamb who bears the sins of the world. The belief system attached to the divine victim offers a solution to evil. Gerard skillfully shows how the solution is illusional, yet it works. Listen, but I would emphasize that the solution works only for people who are themselves delusional. Thank you. In an insane world, insanity makes sense. I got a feeling somebody's going to make that a Facebook post tonight. In an insane world, insanity makes sense. Another hard lesson of history is this. Humanity cannot achieve coevolution with the planet as long as society follows the agenda of divine retribution. Can we read that again? Of course we can. Another hard lesson for my beautiful people and for you to share with the world. Let them know that the divine Christ is here. Let them know that the message of Christ is here. This is nothing to be scared of. You guys in church know about the 24 elders? You know about the Essenes? For my scholars, you know about the Tat Brotherhood? The Cathars? The Scythians? The Ophites? The Ophioites? Another hard lesson of history is this. Humanity cannot achieve coevolution with the planet. Another hard lesson of history is this. Humanity cannot achieve coevolution with the planet as long as society follows the agenda of divine retribution. We cannot have a religion of nature, which Rene Dubos, Dubos, said was imperative for survival, as long as religion and politics keep their infernal deal struck long ago in canon and made official by Constantine. See, we live in two different worlds right now, family. And I might have to do a part 2 of this. We'll see. But we are living in a split world where some people are still stuck in the third dimensional world, and some people are right there with the fourth dimensional, prepared for this fifth dimensional world. We keep stepping up. We keep leveling up. And if you in 2022 cannot accept the fact that you are spiritually divine, that the mythological story of Jesus was in fact your story about how we fell into these physical bodies. If you can't understand that before Adam and Eve, there was the story of Sophia, the divine mother, and we're going to go deeper into the Sophia story. Because as I am gifted with this wisdom, I'm going to share it with the people. There's more to the Sophia story than you heard me or others give. So you got to understand the fall of the divine mother when she created the deity that you praise in your Bible. So the ironic thing, and the thing that kind of makes me laugh but also kind of feel upset a little bit, because our women in church go so hard for the Father God. But what saddens me and is so crazy is that if they do their research and see that really all the energy is just divine mother, that the Orthodox Christian founders of your religion took the mother out. These are the same Christians that say when you are on your menstrual cycle that a woman needs to be confined in a room and cleansed of her issue, like she's an animal or something. But if you don't know divine mothers like Hapatia, if you don't know divine mothers like Sophia or the story of Lilith Barbello, so many more, Ayana, Asherah, who was the wife of Yahweh. So you're in church praising this Father God, but don't even give credit to his wife. And some of y'all say you love your marriages. Well, let me continue on. It's most likely going to be a part 2, guys. So I thank you for this. Leave comments, hit the like button, let me know. We cannot have a religion of nature, which Rene Dubos said was imperative for survival, as long as religion and politics keep their infraternal deal struck long ago in canon, Canaan, and made official by Constantine. Roman Christianity is not the entire problem. All salvationist belief systems are. But it is the most triumphant of perpetration schemes. It has conjured hell on earth, eradicated the Gnostics, destroyed the mysteries, destroyed the learning of antiquity, torn out the pagan heart of Europe, murdered midwives and healers, colonized the globe, burned and hung tribal children of the Americas, bankrolled, and this kind of gets me like really, it kind of gets me as I read this, so y'all gotta bear with me. Roman Christianity, guys. This is what I say about gaining your power back. This is why I get upset with the people of the world. This is why I'm the divine Christ. This is why we are here in real time to heal the world by first healing ourselves and knowing that we are the Christ. The Christ is here. This is why, because we have people in the Vatican, people like the Pope, who know all of this, who have in that Vatican our secret knowledge. We're so worried about icons. We're so worried about what's going on in the world or whatnot that we won't tune into our indigenous supernatural powers that is our birthright. We are so focused on what this person doing, what this person think of me, how this person make me feel, what I'm going to eat tomorrow. Like, this is fucking crazy. So let me read this again. And we all have been guilty of it. I mean, we're this flesh. But as we get older, as we get into the gnosis, the knowledge, the wisdom, know better, do better. We cannot have a religion of nature, which Rene Dubos said was imperative for survival as long as religion and politics keep their infernal deal struck long ago in canon and made official by Constantine. Roman Christianity, who runs the world? Roman Christianity, who runs the world? Roman Christianity, who runs the world? Roman Christianity. Roman Christianity is not the entire problem. All salvationist belief systems are, but it is the most triumphant of perpetration schemes. It has conjured hell on earth, eradicated the Gnostics, destroyed the mysteries, destroyed the learning of antiquity, torn out the pagan heart of Europe, murdered midwives and healers, colonized the globe, burned and hung the tribal children of the Americas, bankrolled the despoliation of nature and the pernicious deception of third world peoples, and to hide its crime, it cast a spell of guilt and ignorance over 60 generations. Shit! Huh? Oh, you damn right I will read that again. This is the Darus Corbin Mystery School. You subscribe here, you already know you family. You are the elite and light ones. You are masters. Masters in training. But even a master knows he's always going to be a student because there's always so much more to learn. Roman Christianity is not the entire problem. All salvationist belief systems are, but it is the most triumph of perpetration schemes. It has conjured hell on earth, eradicated the Gnostics, destroyed the mysteries, destroyed the learning of antiquity, torn out the pagan heart of Europe, murdered midwives and healers, colonized the globe, burned and hung the tribal children of the Americas, bankrolled the despoliation of nature and the pernicious Pernicious deception of third world peoples, and to hide its crimes, it cast a spell of guilt and ignorance over 60 generations. 60 generations. Break that spell, and the black magic of redemptive theology will begin to dissolve. Well, how do we do this? Break the spell, and the black magic of redemptive theology will begin to dissolve, allowing the divine scapegoat to aspire of its own unnatural causes. A unique message of love. I told you. Remember I told you in the last one. It's going to feel naked sometimes, but I'm going to cover you up with that divine Christ love. This is what we're here for. We told you we was coming. Our teachers, our healers, our shamans, the ones you call witches, sorcerers, our babas told you about this. You don't expect this to be at this time in 2022? You are silly and mistaken and ignorant of your divine will. A unique message of love. See here where we at, 53. If you still watch at this time, thank you. Thank you. The divine victim mirrors to humanity not the solution to our suffering and a way to overcome it, but our total consuming enslavement to it. The divine victim mirrors to humanity not the solution to our suffering and a way to overcome it like you think it does, but our total consuming enslavement to it. Victimage works because it makes the force of suffering look stronger than the life force itself. Rewind. Victimage works because it makes the force of suffering look stronger than the life force itself. Command to love is what it says. If all this were not enough, and it is quite a lot, I know, family. A vast abyss into which to gaze without dizziness, there is a final fatal twist like the barb on the hook that keeps it buried in the mouth. The immense power of scapegoating is due to the victim-perpetrator collision, but the divine victim's salvation history is not just a victim. He is also a God-sent emissary. That's emissary, with a unique message of love. Jesus is the preeminent messenger of love, many people believe. When the Pharisees asked him, and I quote, which is the first commandment of all, end quote, he replied, the first of all commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the first of all commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt not love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the greatest and first commandment, and the second is this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Mark 12:29-31. All of which sounds wonderful, and family, we about to go in. That's why I say we might have to do a part two. But we about to go in now. Y'all heard, and some of y'all know this quote, right? We about to go in. Watch this. All of which sounds wonderful until we ask the question, who really needs to be commanded to love? Who really needs to be commanded to love? Anyone who has loved anything in life, be it another person, an animal, a place in nature, a work, art, whatever, knows that love comes by its own power. It cannot and need not be commanded. Imagine that you are shown the Grand Canyon and commanded to love it. You might not love it, but if you do not have to be commanded. We love spontaneously through the power of love itself, which cannot be commanded. If this is the self-evident truth about love and human experience, why should love of God and love of one's neighbor be any different? The command to love is the supreme manipulative ploy of the authoritative lie. Let me read that again. The command to love is the supreme manipulative ploy of the authoritarian lie, the deepest cut into the moral sovereignty of the human animal. In a two-line poem, and I quote, Retort to Jesus, end quote, D.H. Lawrence said that whoever forces himself to love engenders a murderer in his own breast. But to be a little more generous, it could be called the central plea of divine parentalism, whose leading spokesman is Jesus Christ. Much of what Jesus said is patent nonsense that goes against human nature. I know some of y'all don't like to hear that, but once again, much of what Jesus said is patent nonsense that goes against human nature, like the above verses. But no one blinks an eye when these commandments are pronounced. Why not? Because the messenger of love is a divine victim in human guise. And to refute Jesus would dispel the absolving power of the scapegoat. We would be completely on our own with no rules to follow, forced to judge what is good and evil by reliance on human standards with no absolution for perpetrators and no vinification for victims. This is the unbearable essential truth of the human condition. But no, we only suppose it unbearable. In fact, we have not tried it out. We have never lived through to see how it really feels. There is so much religious and historical conditioning layered onto the human psyche that it impedes access to the naked veracity of our own experience. R.D. Laing, and that's Laing, asserted that the ultimate destruction that can be done to a human being is to destroy its capacity to have its own experience. And patriarchal monotheism has done this. Using religion as its pretext, speaking from the same perception, Gnostics warned that salvationism would defeat our divine endowment, nous, N-O-U-S, the human potential to learn and evolve. How can we know what humans are capable of doing out of their own resources if we rely on a superhuman agency to pre-decide the most elementary issues of life? The message of love is the barb on the hook of victim-perpetrator collision, and the bait on the hook is Jesus. Somewhere in his works, Joseph Campbell presents a medieval woodcut depicting Jesus lowered from heaven on a huge hook to show that he was a fisher of men, quote, end quote. The message of the man of sorrows, quote, end quote, is so contrary to the human condition that it has taken centuries of apologetic manipulation to make it look even halfway right. In Beyond Theology, Alan Watts wrote, and I quote, we are spiritually paralyzed by the fetish of Jesus, even to atheists he is a supremely good man, the exemplar and moral authority with whom no one may disagree. Whatever our opinions, we must perforce wrangle the words of Jesus to agree with them. Poor Jesus, if he had known how great an authority was to be projected upon him, he would never have said a word. And the process goes on still. In an essay entitled, and I quote, "The Christian Paradox, How a Faithful Nation Gets Jesus Wrong," end quote, environmental writer Bill McKibben, Kibben, The End of Nature, says of the verses from Mark 12 that command love, that from the verses that of Mark 12 that command love, and I quote, although its rhetorical power has been dimmed by a recognition that is a radical notion, perhaps the most radical notion possible, end quote. If we assume this is true, we will be compelled to do anything and everything imaginable to get in line with the teachings of Jesus, quote, end quote. Believing that following his advice would change the human condition. If we mere humans have difficulty putting his sublime message into practice, it has to be all our fault. If Jesus said things that were universally true and essentially to living the way humans should live, and we get Jesus wrong, this is a grave problem indeed. But if Jesus himself was wrong, that is a problem far graver. Look at history and consider all that has been said and done to show that Jesus was right, compared to what has been said and done to show that he was wrong. Of the latter argument, there is almost nothing. If refutations of Jesus existed, they had most certainly been destroyed, as the writings of the Gnostics were destroyed. What does the near total absence of a counter argument tell you? In the theological library at the Catholic University of Leuven, and that's Leuven, where I sometimes do research on the Gnostic writings or the Dead Sea Scrolls, author says, there are entire floors of long stacks of books that argue that Jesus was right. The surviving Gnostic argument against Christianity can be found in one book, the Nag Hammadi Library in English. It is like finding one edible flake of oatmeal in a reeking landfill the size of a football stadium. We are an hour in now, family. I'm going to give you about a good hour 20. Y'all good? I can feel the energy. Because as I read, I'm starting to like time travel into like a pre-existent time. And I feel like I'm in like a certain libraries in Greek and Egypt times. It's a beautiful thing. And I got a feeling you guys are feeling the same energy. So thank you for rocking with me. The divine Christ is here. People, you are the divine Christ. You are the messengers now. You always been. You are now stepping into your gnosis of yourself. The collective writings of the Church Fathers dedicated to refuting the Gnostics, the dozier of the prosecution alone occupies several yards of shelf space, and the Patriot's literature is merely a silver of the sum total of apologetic and defensive discourse that has been produced to prove that Jesus was right. We tend to believe that Jesus was right because there has been such a monumental effort to convince the world that this is so. But the extent of the argument is no proof of its veracity. Veracity. In fact, it could be evidence of the contrary, a monumental effort to convert the human mind to the bad faith of betrayed humanity. My gosh. Send this video to your church folk and tell them and listen with an open mind and don't judge. Because if they listen with an open ear and an open heart, you are now getting the truth, divinely of who you are. My biggest question to you, family, what are you going to do with it now? I can give it to you, but what you going to do with it? I can give it to you, but what? Shout out to Cuban Mac 10, West Side Connection. Why is it so difficult to refute Jesus? Well, apart from the staggering complicity of the Redeemer complex and the murky pathologically victim-perpetrator collision, both of which represents a formidable challenge to human understanding requiring an extraordinary exercise of patience, there are two other considerable obstacles in the way. The first is the problem posed by the, and I quote, the teachings of Jesus, and it has several knotty aspects. Y'all good with maybe 16 more minutes? We might have to do a part two. Jesus himself wrote nothing down, so the words attributed to him were written by other people. Let me say that again. Jesus himself wrote nothing down, so the words attributed to him were written by other people. To trust that we have a fair and accurate record of what the Lord said, we must trust those who recorded his words. But even if we trust Jesus, believing that he really lived and had a unique message for humankind, trusting those who wrote down that message is another matter. Let's consider that his message can be found exclusively in the words attributed to him, commonly printed in red in the New Testament. Extract all these passages and you have what Jesus is alleged to have said. But the teachings are not in these words alone. They are also in all that has been said and written about those words, namely the exposition of the teachings. One can accept all this material as a valid part, and I quote, the teachings of Jesus, end quote. But with the exposition, we face the same problem again, to trust those who produced it. We are always one step removed from Jesus, depending on the unknown people who wrote down the words attributed to him, and on the many known people who have provided a supporting commentary on those words. In short, we are in position of having to trust what others say in order to know what Jesus said. Now, there is a way to get around this problem. Let's assume that all that Jesus taught, the essence and scope of his message, can be found in the verbatim passages printed in red. This narrowed down the task considerably. No matter what has been made of what Jesus said, if we cannot find this, no matter what has been made of what Jesus said, if we cannot find the essential message in his own words, then we are really not getting to his message at all, are we? Even though we cannot be entirely sure that the verbatim record is a true account of his words, we can produce as if it is. We can then look at the words themselves, the language, the expressions, and see what kind of teachings they present. Give me a drink of water. Y'all all right? Without requiring too much scrutiny, this exercise easily reveals that there is a little original. Without requiring too much scrutiny, this exercise easily reveals that there is little original content in the words attributed to Jesus. Note also that the commandment to, and I quote, love thy neighbor did not originate with the Galilean. It can be found in Leviticus 19:18, and I quote, thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord, end quote. And the way this commandment is stated, it clearly refers to conflict with the Jewish community to which it is addressed. Its attention is to restrain retaliatorial violence within the limits of the tribe. This declaration, and I quote, I am the Lord, emphasizes that the command comes from a superhuman agency that must neither be questioned nor challenged. There is no teaching here, merely a command given to a particular tribal group to behave in a certain way. Commandments do not teach us anything. Jesus did not teach either. He merely cites this commandment, but then in another context, he modifies it. And I quote, ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them who desperately use and persecute you. Matthew 6:43-44. Y'all hearing this shit? I'll read it again. Ye have heard that it has been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, but bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them who despitefully use and persecute you. That was Matthew's. Now it seems these verses really show the original essence of Jesus' teaching. Jesus here refutes the Old Testament law of, I quote, an eye for an eye, considered in pagan and indigenous societies to be a perfectly adequate solution when the perpetrator is known. It is often said that Christianity makes its greatest advance over Judaism by rejecting eye for eye, morality for universal love. I'll say that again. It is often said that Christianity makes its greatest advance over Judaism by rejecting eye for eye, morality for universal love. But considering what we have learned about scapegoating, it would be wise to listen closely to what the divine victim says about victimage in the verses cited. The great moral advance Jesus proposes is a straightforward endorsement of victim-perpetrator collision. Do good to them that hurt you, quote, end quote. When this commandment is combined with the assurance that abuse and persecution will earn the Redeemer's favor, and I quote, blessed art thou when you are persecuted for my sake, end quote, victims have a divine sanction to be abused and even to invite abuse. Now, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop there for today. Y'all want to hear part 2? Let me know, because we're not done. And you know, I want to give a shout out to my channels and my people who are going on subjects like beings in the underworld, beings with a melanated skin race, the black race, those beings being in certain underworlds and stuff like that. And for the people who talk about the Syrians and Palladians, the people who know that there are already beings in this world now, I thank y'all channels as well because I learn a lot. It's just crazy how so many people are still blind and don't even want to talk about those conversations. They look at people like us, and we don't care, but still, they look at people like us like we're still crazy. Like all they have to do is research and know that this is real. This is our story, not his story, our story. There are primordial worlds. There are portals and stargates, divine beings, ascending masters, reptilians, archons. And when I do my presentation of the archons, God's Goonies, brace yourself. Because we're going to see the origins of racism as it go all the way back to the cosmos. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into melanin and how it relates to the archons. So I like to do these presentations on the Gnostics because, family, we have been so far behind on where we at right now. You got people using vibrations and musical vibrations and frequencies to fuck with your thoughts. And here you are still praising the one subordinate deity who has no beneficial good for you in this physical world. If he can have it his way, you will continue to be slaves and food for his archons and himself. Food. Food. Well, people, it's always a pleasure. Darus Corbin Mystery School, the home of the esoteric and metaphysical knowledge. Stay tuned. Don't forget the Darus Corbin Mystery School, but I have the Darus Corbin channel. Just type in the Darus Corbin channel. And then I have Lucky Shot at Jamaica as well. Lucky Shot at Jamaica. Peace and love, family. See you soon.